The simple story, learned in childhood, is that labor transformed ape into man. But the ascent of our species to become masters of a planet is a far more complex saga, a chain of events forged by shifting climates, fierce competition, and, most profoundly, by what we ate. The human story is, in essence, a culinary one. To the modern palate, accustomed to a global larder available at any hour, the diet of our distant ancestors is almost unimaginable. Even the most ardent proponents of so-called paleo diets grasp only a fraction of the truth, for it was on the anvil of ancient sustenance that our very identity was hammered into shape, granting our lineage an advantage over all others.
Scientific inquiry reveals a crucial divergence. The diet of our direct ancestors, the Cro-Magnons, was composed of nearly 2/3 plant matter. This dietary flexibility became a decisive weapon in the long, competitive struggle against our cousins, the Neanderthals, who subsisted almost entirely on meat. While Neanderthals adapted their bodies to a changing world, our ancestors adapted their minds, developing technologies to procure and process an ever wider variety of foods. This nutritional opportunism, this refusal to depend solely on the fortunes of the hunt, allowed them to survive and thrive in the harshest of conditions. But this journey began long before, in the deep time of the early Cenozoic, when the first primates subsisted on a diet of insects. From there, a long evolutionary chapter was written in the trees, a story of fruits and leaves. The great turning point came when our ancestors descended to the ground, stepping out into the vast, challenging landscapes of the African savanna. Here, they became true omnivores. In a remarkable evolutionary gamble, our lineage began to consume fibrous grasses and grains, foods entirely alien to the primate digestive system. This adaptation, which allowed us to unlock the energy in cereals and tubers, was a pivotal moment. It laid the biological foundation for the bread and grains that would later fuel civilizations. These constant dietary shifts created a unique biological legacy, a suite of enzymes in our bodies capable of digesting an astonishing array of substances, from complex starches to the chitin in an insect's exoskeleton. The story is pieced together from the silent testimony of archaeology. Stone tools reveal not just how an animal was hunted, but how it was butchered, its marrow extracted. Microscopic analysis of ancient pottery uncovers the residue of forgotten meals. The very chemistry of fossilized bone and teeth holds a permanent record of the foods that built our ancestors' body and mind. It is a history written not in ink, but in the elements of life itself, a chronicle of the unending quest for energy that propelled a clever ape toward planetary dominance.
The story of our deepest past is not written in books, but etched in bone and stone. To understand who we were, we must first uncover what we ate. The evidence lies scattered across millennia, the silent artifacts of survival. A finely napped flint point, still sharp enough to tell of the hunt. A heavy grinding stone, its surface worn smooth by the tireless processing of grain. These are the tools that shaped our world, but they are only half the story. The other half is found in the remains of the meal itself. In ancient hearths and forgotten caves, the bones of long-extinct animals bear the unmistakable marks of butchery, the slice of a stone blade, the impact of a primitive axe. They are a menu, written across time, revealing the prey that stalked the landscapes of Paleolithic Europe and the hunters who pursued them. While our direct ancestors, the Cro-Magnons, are known to have embraced a diet rich in grains, the earliest known culinary revolution was sparked by another people entirely. It was the Neanderthals who, in a moment of profound innovation, created the world's first porridge. Whether they boiled the ground grains into a thick gruel or baked them into a rudimentary flatbread remains a mystery, lost to the smoke of their ancient fires.
We cannot know if this was a moment of independent genius or an idea borrowed from their new, encroaching neighbors. But it reveals a mind capable of complex, multi-step food preparation, a far cry from the brutish caricature of popular imagination.
Sometimes the past gives up its secrets, not in fragments, but in one astonishing whole. In the Ötztal Alps, a man frozen in time for over 5,000 years offered an unprecedented window into the prehistoric larder. Ötzi the Iceman, through the contents of his own stomach, provided a final, detailed meal plan. Isotope analysis revealed a complex tapestry of flavors and textures: the wild meat of chamois and red deer, the earthy taste of foraged roots, and the distinct presence of einkorn wheat bran. There is compelling evidence that his meat was not freshly roasted over a fire, but was instead a form of preserved jerky or smoked meat, a provision for a long journey, a precursor to the cured hams and salamis that still define the region's cuisine. In his final hours, Ötzi carried with him a tradition of food preservation that would echo for thousands of years. Yet, for the countless ancestors who did not die so perfectly preserved, the clues must be sought in what remains: their teeth. The human dental archive is remarkably resilient, a biological record of a lifetime of meals. The very shape and size of a tooth is a story of adaptation. Primates who feast primarily on soft fruits possess wide, smooth molars. But a diet rich in hard nuts and seeds leaves a microscopic landscape of scratches and pits, a clear signature of the force required to break through tough shells.
Modern science allows us to peer even closer, analyzing the chemical ghosts of food trapped in the hardened plaque between teeth. But the most profound truths are absorbed into our very being. The adage, "You are what you eat," is, for the paleoscientist, a literal truth. Trace elements from specific food sources accumulate in bone and tissue over a lifetime. A diet heavy in legumes, for instance, leaves a distinct signature of the element vanadium. A life sustained by meat, on the other hand, leads to a high concentration of zinc. This is precisely what has been found in the remains of Neanderthals, whose bones are so rich in zinc that they speak of a relentless, specialized focus on hunting large game. Through this meticulous analysis, we uncover not just diets, but entire lives. At Dolní Věstonice, in what is now the Czech Republic, archaeologists unearthed a settlement of mammoth hunters, a community that thrived at the edge of the ice sheets. The remains of at least 35 individuals were found, yet one man stood apart. Isotopic analysis of his femur revealed a tract of this man's diet had come from the water, from fish and aquatic birds. He was a traveler or a trader, an individual whose life story was profoundly different from those buried beside him. From a simple tool mark on a bone to the atomic signature within it, each discovery is a word in a sentence we are only just beginning to read. We are deciphering the story of survival, of adaptation, and of the innovations that allowed a fragile species to endure. The quest to understand the ancient palate is not merely about food. It is about understanding the very foundation of human culture, a shared history of hunger and satisfaction that connects every meal we eat today to the first fire kindled in the dark.
In the waning light of the last great ice age, a story is etched into ancient bone. It speaks of a traveler, an individual whose diet consisted in part of marine life. This would be unremarkable, save for one detail. Their final resting place was a world away from any ocean. Here, in the heart of the continent, the nearest coastline was a monumental trek across a landscape still healing from the grip of glaciers. To journey from the sea to this location, known to us as Dolní Věstonice, was to cross nearly the entire breadth of inhabited Europe, a formidable odyssey past alpine barriers and through lands prowled by megafauna. The remains are a testament not merely to a diet, but to epic travel. Or perhaps the dawn of long-distance trade networks, a culinary ghost from a forgotten world.
But the story of the human menu is not one of linear progress. In the deeper past of South Africa, scientists uncovered a far stranger dietary habit. The fossils of Australopithecus sediba, an archaic hominin ancestor, revealed a startling preference: tree bark. This was not a desperate last resort meal, it was a staple. In the entire sprawling history of the primate family, no other species is known to have committed to such a culinary experiment. Our own biology recoils at the thought. Human teeth are simply not engineered for the task of grinding wood. The reason for this unique adaptation remains one of paleoanthropology's most perplexing and unresolved mysteries. The quest for sustenance has, at its darkest extremes, led our ancestors down a path we now consider the ultimate taboo. This was not the ritual cannibalism of more recent tribal societies, but something more primal. In the cold darkness of the El Cedrón cave in Spain, a grim tableau was unearthed. Here lay the scattered bones of 13 Neanderthal individuals, males, females, and children. The evidence was unambiguous. The fractures, the cut marks, and the distinct imprints of human teeth told a story of consumption. The prevailing theory paints a desperate picture. Beset by a long and brutal period of hunting failures, one Neanderthal group may have turned on its neighbors. Or perhaps, in an even more harrowing scenario, they turned upon their own kin, a clan consuming itself to survive the unforgiving Iberian winter.
Yet, survival is not always a story of darkness. The single greatest revolution in the human diet was not a new food, but a new tool: fire. The first fleeting mastery of flame appears over 1.5 million years ago, a flicker of genius from Homo habilis on the African savanna. But for the next million years, this power was wielded only sporadically. Across that immense span of time, a mere 20 archaeological sites show evidence of its use. Early humans treated fire much as modern chimpanzees do, where between 350,000 and 400,000 years ago that humanity truly tamed the flame. Suddenly, the remnants of hearths and campfires appear in the geological record across the entire known world. Humankind had learned not just to use fire, but to create and control it, transforming it into a constant companion for warmth, for protection, and most importantly, for cooking. This revolution, born in the embers of 1,000 campfires, began to physically reshape us. Over the next 300,000 years, the consistent consumption of cooked food, more calorie-dense and far easier to digest, left its mark on our very anatomy. The hearth became an external stomach, doing the hard work of breaking down tissues and fibers before they ever entered the body. In response, our physiology changed profoundly. Massive jaws, once needed to tear and grind raw flesh and tough plants, began to recede. Our teeth shrank. Even our rib cages and abdomens grew smaller as the digestive tract shortened, no longer needing to be so vast and robust. This transformation culminated between 50 and 80,000 years ago with the emergence of anatomically modern humans. We are, in a very real sense, the creatures that cooking made. Today we stand at the threshold of another dietary revolution, one defined not by fire, but by cold. For millennia, humanity has sought ways to defy the seasons, using root cellars, ice houses, and the simple act of burying a kill in the frozen earth. Now, the hum of the refrigerator in nearly every home on the planet gives the vast majority of our species the power to store almost any food indefinitely. The fire in the hearth remade our bodies. It is a profound and unanswered question what the silent promise of eternal surplus will ultimately make of us. For millennia, the only reliable freezer was the Earth itself, the vast, unyielding permafrost, a silent witness to the cycles of scarcity and survival. The ability to preserve any food at any time within the humming confines of a kitchen refrigerator is a revolution barely 150 years old. Its consequences, both subtle and seismic, are only now beginning to unfold across the tapestry of human existence.
For countless generations, a primal instinct governed our relationship with food. That which could spoil must be consumed immediately. This urgent, ancient impulse, honed by the unforgiving realities of decay, still echoes within our modern minds. Yet today, it manifests not as a strategy for survival, but as a global paradox. In a world of unprecedented abundance, this vestigial command to consume contributes to the pervasive shadow of obesity, a shared affliction of nations that have forgotten the meaning of hunger. This new dietary landscape, combined with a profound reduction in physical toil, has reshaped our very bodies. For the vast majority of the planet's population, the generational rhythm of labor in the fields, of heavy, back-breaking work, has fallen silent. This liberation from physical struggle has allowed our species to stretch, quite literally, towards the sky. Nowhere is this transformation more starkly illustrated than on the Korean Peninsula. A single people, with a shared history and genetic heritage, cleaved in two by ideology. In the few short decades since their separation, a staggering difference has emerged. The average citizen of the South, nourished by a diverse and plentiful diet, now stands a full 16 centimeters taller than their northern counterpart. It is a stark, living testament to how profoundly nutrition can rewrite our biological destiny in the span of a single human lifetime. In our modern search for authenticity, many have turned to romanticized visions of the past, embracing so-called paleo diets. But this is a selective reading of history, a pale imitation of a brutal reality. We must remember that the vast majority of our ancient ancestors rarely lived to see their 30th year. While their diets were certainly a factor, their lives were cut short by violence, disease, and the unforgiving elements. Modern culinary technologies, from the simple act of boiling water to complex methods of preservation, allow us a level of balanced, safe, and consistent nutrition that would have been unimaginable to them. The true paleo diet was not a singular menu, but a fluid mosaic of regional opportunity and technological prowess. The story of our brain's expansion is inextricably linked to the transition to meat, and more importantly, to the harnessing of fire. The controlled flame was an external stomach, breaking down tough fibers and proteins, unlocking a vault of calories that fueled the growth of the most complex object in the known universe, the human mind. As early humans spread from Africa, they hugged the coastlines, tracing the great arteries of rivers. Here, the water provided a staggering bounty. Their diet was rich with the gifts of the sea and shore. Algae clinging to rocks, patient mollusks pried from their shells, the flesh of waterfowl and great marine mammals. Oysters, now a delicacy of the affluent, were once so common they were considered the food of the destitute. Much of this world is now lost to us, submerged beneath the waves as the great glaciers of the last ice age retreated, making a full accounting of these coastal lives a profound archaeological challenge. Pushing deeper into the continents, our ancestors proved to be supers were masterful generalists. They continued to fish, but added the deep earth nourishment of roots and tubers to their diet, all while hunting a vast array of land animals. They adapted, they innovated, they survived. Yet, it appears the human appetite has always sought more than simple calories. There are tantalizing, though unproven, suggestions that our relationship with certain substances went beyond nutrition. Alcohol and various psychoactive plants may have served other purposes, for ritual, for community, for a deliberate journey away from the mundane. It hints that from the very beginning, consumption was not just about feeding the body, but also about feeding the spirit. The story of what we eat is the story of who we are.
It is a narrative of adaptation, of invention, of a relentless drive to secure a foothold in a challenging world. Our diet has shifted from a direct conversation with the immediate landscape to an act of global, industrial selection. We have conquered the primal fear of starvation, only to find ourselves confronted with a new and far more complex question. In a world of infinite choice, what does it truly mean to be fed?
The story of civilization does not begin with bread. It begins with a thirst.
Long before the first loaf was ever baked, our ancestors looked upon the wild grasses of the Fertile Crescent and saw not the promise of sustenance, but the potential for transformation. The initial drive to domesticate these wild cereals was not for food, but for the alchemy of fermentation, for the creation of beer.
The first faint whispers of humanity's relationship with alcohol echo from the depths of thent forebears. Foraging through the primordial landscape would have stumbled upon berries, fruits, or honey, transformed by time and microscopic life into something that could alter consciousness. This was not a mundane event. In a world steeped in mystery, this state of intoxication was a bridge to the divine, a spiritual key used in sacred rituals rather than a simple daily beverage.
But what began as a mystical rarity soon wove itself into the very fabric of culture. The first deliberate brewing of beer took place in the Near East, a liquid revelation that would travel with humanity on its great migrations. It flowed down the Nile, becoming a staple for the builders of Egypt's monuments. It journeyed northward with the great movements of peoples, carried by ancient Celts and Germanic tribes into the misty forests of Central and Northern Europe. The brew became a cultural current, connecting disparate lands.
This rapid dissemination of a single idea was a hallmark of our species. The human network, even in its infancy, was remarkably efficient at spreading new forms of nourishment across vast regions. The journey of our palate is the journey of our species, and its genesis lies in the mastery of fire. Around 250,000 years ago, the first controlled hearths appeared. This was more than a source of warmth and protection. It was the birth of the culinary arts, the moment we began to deliberately alter our food, unlocking nutrients and flavors previously inaccessible.
170,000 years ago, in Africa, early humans were baking starchy tubers, a foundational act of cooking. The pace of innovation was slow, measured in millennia. Yet, some 20 to 30,000 years ago, a monumental leap occurred. Our ancestors learned to grind wild grains, creating the first rough flours. The path to bread had been laid, even if beer arrived first.
Then, as the last ice age retreated, a revolution took root in the soil.
12,000 years ago, in the wetlands of what is now China, the first rice paddies were cultivated, though some unconfirmed evidence suggests this may have happened thousands of years earlier on the Korean peninsula. Genetic research confirms a remarkable fact. All the myriad varieties of rice that feed billions today descend from a single domestication event.
As the Neolithic era dawned, around 8,000 years before the Common Era, this agricultural awakening became a global phenomenon. In disparate corners of the world, humanity was forging new relationships with the plant kingdom. Figs were being cultivated in the Near East. The gnarled olive tree was tamed in the Mediterranean. High in the Andes of South America, the humble potato was brought into the fold, while in Papua New Guinea, the banana was domesticated.
By 7,000 years before the Common Era, the sophistication of these early farmers was astonishing. In China, complex irrigation channels and controlled fires managed the rice harvests, and the fermented drinks made from this bounty were a part of life. Similar technologies were emerging independently in the fertile lands of ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia. During this same epoch, the first shimmering fields of wheat appeared in Syria, while in modern-day Mexico, a wild grass was being patiently guided on its long journey to becoming maize. It was also a time when we forged one of our most enduring alliances,
domesticating the sheep.
Between the 5th and 6th millennia before the Common Era, the human diet blossomed with new complexity. In the Caucasus Mountains, wild grapes were cultivated, their juice fermented into the world's first wine. In Poland, the earliest evidence of cheese-making appeared, a revolutionary way to preserve the nutrients of milk. Across the ocean, in the Americas, beans and the first true cultivars of corn were flourishing. Rice, on its own epic journey, is thought to have reached India, while in Mesopotamia, the powerful aurochs was tamed, becoming the cattle that would power empires. From 4,500 to 3,500 years before the Common Era, the final pieces of our foundational diet fell into place. In Egypt, the discovery of leavened bread transformed flour and water into a light, airy staple. Olives were now pressed for their golden oil, and the watermelon, once found only in Central Africa, was being cultivated across the continent's north and into Southwest Asia. Each of these steps, from the first fermented fruit to the first leavened loaf, was more than a discovery of a new food. It was a fundamental reshaping of our world and our place within it. We were no longer just participants in the natural world, but its active sculptors, choosing which species would thrive, altering landscapes and redirecting the flow of water and life. In mastering the seed, the soil, and the flame, humanity was not merely learning to feed itself, it was learning to become itself. 4,000 years before the Common Era, on the sun-scorched plains of Mesopotamia, a scribe inscribed a hymn not to a king, but to Ninkasi, the goddess of beer. This ancient ode is the earliest testament to a craft that would shape societies, a liquid bread that nourished the builders of the first cities. Within 500 years, this knowledge of fermentation had traversed the Zagros Mountains into ancient Iran. Simultaneously, on another continent, cultures in China were mastering the waters, beginning the systematic farming of carp.
As the millennia turned, by 3,000 years before the Common Era, the mastery of nature's bounty deepened. In the fertile valleys of the Near East and along the Nile, humanity learned to tame the wild grape, giving rise to the art of winemaking in Egypt. The Egyptians also unlocked the secrets of the palm, pressing its fruit for precious oil. Across the vast Atlantic, in North America, native peoples began cultivating the sunflower, while in Europe, the Celts and Germanic tribes carried the tradition of brewing northward, adapting it to colder climes.
1,500 years before the Common Era, a new grain began its global journey. Rice, first cultivated in Africa, soon appeared in the fields of the Middle East. At roughly the same time, in Western Asia, the cucumber was domesticated, adding its crisp coolness to the ancient palate. The great exchanges of culture and sustenance were often driven by conquest. In the 4th century before the Common Era, the campaigns of Alexander the Great carved a path not just for armies, but for agriculture. The Romans learned of rice through his eastern expansion, though they preferred to import it as wine rather than cultivate the grain themselves. Alexander's armies also carried back the seeds of the citron, the progenitor of a vast family of citrus fruits, planting a legacy of flavor in Greece and Palestine. This relentless march of culinary innovation has never ceased. It has given us feci of instant noodles. Then, in the year 2013, a profound threshold was crossed. The first hamburger patty was not raised in a field, but synthesized from molecules in a laboratory. The long arc of history teaches a simple truth. We became the masters of this planet through our omnivorous, adaptable palate. From the first fermented grain to a meal grown without a farm, our story is one of restless ingenuity. It suggests that our survival has always been linked not just to what we can find, but to what we can create.